Well, so
What?
you can just stay like on the couch for a while. Maybe this is just like Cody,
Why would I sleep on the couch?
because that's what you do when you don't have.
The Brown family appeared to be the epitome of perfection at first glance. Their joyful expressions, opulent family vacations, and well-chosen TV moments told a tale of peace, love, and solidarity. The family represented a joyful, religious home to millions of viewers. However, the reality was much more nuanced for those who resided within the Brown home. Robyn had once been close to Mykelti. Her fortitude and ability to handle the challenges of living with Kody and his several wives had been something she had admired. Mykelti initially believed what she saw on TV: the joy, the jubilation, the seeming commitment. She started to notice the little, unnerving nuances that the cameras missed, though, as she spent more time with Robyn. Hey, hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel, TLC Flicks. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Even seemingly insignificant arguments were frequently indicators of more serious strain. Kody's tastes gently influenced decisions that seemed to be made in concert. Despite her kind disposition, Robyn frequently took the brunt of his domineering influence. Mykelti became increasingly aware that the family's public persona was a meticulously crafted facade that concealed years of deceit and silent annoyance as she continued to observe. It was startling to see the contrast between the private reality and the grins on broadcast. Mykelti witnessed Robyn forgo her own needs in order to keep the peace, make countless concessions, and put up with subtly controlled emotions, all for the sake of appearances. She recognized that it was a pattern that had been repeated over many years, unseen by the millions of people who loved the family from a distance. Mykelti had a mixture of sadness and uneasiness as she considered these observations. She wanted to keep Robyn safe because she loved her. The underlying reality, however, was indisputable. The harmony the world witnessed was brittle, and the fissures were growing. Mykelti realized then that she might have to keep quiet about what she had formerly thought of as loyalty, but her conscience insisted on her speaking up. The expansive rooms and immaculate facade of the Brown home belied secrets that the cameras never caught. Tension simmered inside like a saucepan on low heat, barely audible but unavoidable once heard. After having previously praised the family's unity, Mykelti started to notice the patterns of manipulation and control that influenced day-to-day existence. Kody had a subtle yet widespread impact on the family. He frequently silently dictated decisions that ought to have been discussed among the women. Every decision he made, whether it was about a family rule, a vacation spot, or even how to discipline the kids, reflected his power. Robyn bore the unseen weight of compromise, negotiation, and cautious diplomacy, despite her outward appearance of composure and cooperation. The revelations were startling to Mykelti. She had trusted the family's romanticized portrayal, but now she could see the stress hiding behind the smiles. She could no longer deny the pattern of the uncomfortable silences, the hushed fights, and the brief displays of frustration. As she continued to watch, Mykelti became aware of the amount of effort Robyn put into keeping the peace. Every decision and every phrase were evaluated in light of the possibility of conflict. Each of the other spouses carved out her own place within the parameters established by Kody's influence, navigating similar limitations. Although the families seemed to be together, Robyn was mostly responsible for the cost of that unity. Mykelti started recording what she observed in her mind during these observational times, assembling the unseen ties that held the family together. She saw that Kody's power was not always obvious. Rather, it was frequently demonstrated through subtly applied pressure, silent demands, and the deliberate manipulation of allegiance. The more she saw, the more she realized that the family's personal problems were more profound than anyone could have ever imagined, and that the unity that the world loved was brittle. Mykelti began to question her own role for the first time. Did she have an obligation to speak up about what she really seen, or could she keep quiet and maintain her allegiance to Kody and the family image? As the rifts in the Brown home widened and threatened the fragile equilibrium that had endured for so long, the response weighed heavy on her. As the reality of the Brown household became unavoidable, Mykelti and Robyn's once close bond started to change. Robyn's resilience, patience, and demeanor in the face of adversity were qualities Mykelti had admired. Her adoration, however, soon gave way to worry and then to dread as she realized the emotional toll that Kody's control had taken. The tension Robyn carried was exposed in their private moments together. Mykelti saw Robyn swallow her actual emotions, repress her annoyance, and use tactful word choice to steer clear of confrontation. She was no longer able to explain the trend as typical family dynamics. Because of Kody's influence, a delicate web had been established in which every word and action had to be carefully considered, and every choice had to be preemptively evaluated against his expectations. Mykelti noticed the profound impact on the family's lives as she watched. Although the other spouses also had to deal with Kody's subdued power, Robyn appeared to be the one who had to deal with it the most. Even though they were mostly protected, the kids were able to detect tension and uneasiness, even if they didn't fully comprehend it. Mykelti was one of the few who could witness the meticulously manicured facade of a peaceful family come apart from within. She was troubled by the realization. In the past, she had remained faithful to Kody, believing in the familial unit he had established. Now, however, loyalty required a different approach. There was no more room for silence. She could not watch Robyn take the brunt of a control that she had before disregarded. Mykelti made a decision one peaceful evening as the family relaxed following a day full of unspoken conflicts. She would no longer stand by and watch. She would record her observations, recall each nuanced maneuver, each silent demand, each moment of repressed annoyance. She would testify because she felt obligated to tell the truth, not because she was malicious. She realized the road ahead would be challenging by the time she eventually shared her concerns with herself and then with a trusted group outside the family. There were repercussions for even tacitly criticizing Kody, but she had no option because of the emotional toll of what she had witnessed. The world had never heard the story she now bore, and she had changed from friend to witness. For years, the tension in the Brown home had been steadily increasing until one night it finally reached a breaking point. Subtle pressure and suppressed annoyance burst into obvious fissures that were impossible to ignore. With a mixture of fear and resolve, Mykelti observed from the sidelines. Normally calm and collected, Robyn was unable to bear the burden she had been bearing. An argument over a seemingly insignificant family choice turned into a heated altercation. In a moment, the meticulously preserved facade of harmony broke down as voices raised and angry eyes flashed. The other wives exchanged heated looks, and the children, feeling the dispute, became restless. It was enlightening for Mykelti. This was the culmination of all the meticulously planned appearances, courteous smiles, and nuanced controls. She understood that the subtly imposed demands, the emotional strain, and the stealthy manipulation she had been witnessing for months were not unique or coincidental. It was a component of a broader pattern that had governed the dynamics of the family for a long time. Mykelti experienced a change in herself during that intense moment. She could not be neutral any longer. Her allegiance to Kody had vanished, to be replaced by a shrewd understanding of his power and the harm it had brought about. Once seen from afar, Robyn's struggle now required recognition, and Mykelti realized that simply seeing was insufficient. The breaking point revealed the truth that Mykelti had been afraid to face. The Brown family's idealized facade was a flimsy one, maintained by passive obedience, control, and repression. The fissures were raw and obvious, no longer concealed. Mykelti made the decision to speak the truth in that moment, not out of retaliation but rather out of a need to share the reality she had witnessed and to help Robyn in a way she had never been able to do before. That night's events were a watershed moment. The tale of the Brown household was no longer one of silent perseverance. The passive observer had turned into an active witness. Mykelti knew there would be no going back once she started sharing what she knew. But change had already started. There was no longer the silence that had pervaded the Brown home. The weight of silence had been too much for Mykelti to bear, and she was no longer able to keep her observations to herself. She needed to acknowledge the moments she had seen. The manipulation, the control, the emotional toll on Robyn. The moment had come to speak. Her remarks were unflinching when she eventually spoke her viewpoint. She explained what she had witnessed, the covert pressures Kody applied, the unseen guidelines that influenced each choice, and the silent costs Robyn paid to keep the peace. There was no hesitation, no sugarcoating. Each and every detail she revealed a family that was much more complex than the public had been given access to. The response came instantly. Fans who had been watching the show for years were taken aback and engaged in heated online and private debates. Her bravery was hailed by some as a long overdue discovery. Others defended Kody and the family they had long adored, raising doubts about her intentions. Social media exploded, and it was hard to stop the conversation. The Browns' pristine image had been shattered, and it was now impossible to overlook the fractures. Speaking up was frightening and liberating for Mykelti. She was aware of the consequences of her disclosures. The repercussions would be felt by the family she had previously adored and supported. She was aware, however, that silence came at a price, one that Robyn and the kids had been bearing for years. Mykelti thought that by being honest, she would illuminate the unseen hardships, validate the perspectives of those caught up in the dynamics of the household, and spur a long overdue reckoning. Both the family and Mykelti herself underwent a sea change as a result of the public exposure. Her voice had changed from that of a silent observer to one that was unavoidable and active. Once shielded by notoriety and outward appearances, the Brown household was now subject to criticism, examination, and inquiries they were unable to avoid. The family's personal conflicts were later discussed in public, and the meticulously staged reality that the cameras had previously recorded had given way to the unadulterated reality. By speaking, Mykelti had created the conditions for transformation, conflict, and an introspection that would reverberate throughout the Brown family's whole existence. The Brown family encountered a storm unlike anything they had ever encountered when Mykelti's revelations were made public. Long enthralled with the pristine television image, fans now engaged in heated dispute regarding what had been captured on camera. Social media was alive with rumors, anger, and conflicting allegiances. Others backed Kody, saying Mykelti's remarks were unfair or overstated. Others commended her courage and insisted that the truth had been revealed at last. Tension increased within the family. After quietly enduring years of subtle control, Robyn started to feel empowered. She witnessed someone she trusted mirror and verify her experiences for the first time. The other spouses were also compelled to face their own roles in Kody's meticulously run home. Once controlled and calibrated, every interaction now carried the burden of scrutiny and unintended repercussions. Kody found it difficult to keep things under control now that the fissures in the household were visible. The world could now see the secret dynamics that had previously permitted him to rule covertly. Every choice, argument, and statement was examined, evaluated, and dissected. The family's public image started to be questioned by the media and fans alike, exposing a disconnect between perception and reality that was difficult to bridge. Even though they were largely excluded from the public discussion, the kids could sense the strain in the home. The atmosphere became more charged, the arguments more intense, and the subtle norms of restraint and compliance more obvious. All of the family members were being affected by the repercussions of long-suppressed annoyances and covert manipulation that were starting to show. Mykelti stayed firm through it all. The Brown household's course had changed as a result of her decision to speak up. What had been kept quiet, under control, and hidden was suddenly open and indisputable. In addition to revealing Kody's power, she had given Robyn's hardships and the silent strains the whole family was under a voice. The consequences were only getting started. There were a lot of unanswered questions concerning truth, manipulation, and allegiance. The Browns' meticulously constructed reality had been destroyed, leaving behind unfiltered emotion, broken relationships, and a public that was now demanding explanations. A reckoning that would permanently alter the family was sparked by Mykelti's discoveries. A boiling point was reached in the Brown household, which was already strained by internal conflicts and public attention. The strain that had been steadily increasing for years was now uncontrollable, as though the weight of unspoken truths were weighing down the walls themselves. Every look, every word, and every choice suddenly bore an electric charge. Robyn started to assert herself in ways she had never ventured before after being empowered by Mykelti's revelations. Under Kody's influence, decisions that had previously been made in silence were now openly debated, contested, and questioned. The other wives watched warily, balancing their own dissatisfaction and the fact that the family's private problems were now in the public eye against their loyalty. For the first time, Kody found himself in an uncontrollable situation. Robyn and others who had silently accepted his power opposed his calm dominance, which had previously gone unchallenged. The fissures that had been concealed for years were revealed when arguments that had previously been kept to themselves turned into verbal altercations. As observant as ever, the kids could feel the tension rising. Once intended as times for family bonding, family dinners have evolved into arenas of suppressed emotion. Raw emotions, spoken animosity, and the truth of years of repressed conflict were exposed when the painstakingly crafted truce fell apart. Seeing this escalation was both sobering and validating for Mykelti. The repercussions were being felt immediately after she had spoken her opinion. The dynamics she had revealed now had to be faced by the family she had once silently watched. Once imperceptible and unobtrusive, Kody's impact was now at the forefront of all conversations and interactions. The tipping point was a turning tide rather than just one conflict. The family's public image was no longer shielded by quiet, raw emotion, indisputable truth, and the start of a reckoning that would forever alter the Brown home took its place. There was no going back once Mykelti had kindled a spark. The world was now witnessing the Brown family's private hardships, which had previously only existed within their house. Social media was ablaze with conversations over Robyn's hardships, Mykelti's disclosures, and Kody's actions. Every interview, footage, and nuanced exchange from previous episodes was re-examined with a fresh, critical perspective. While the family themselves became the focus of an uncontrollable media storm, fans engaged in heated debate, with some supporting Kody's actions and others denouncing them. Robyn found the attention from the public to be both freeing and confining. On the one hand, her supporters' support confirmed what she had been through for years. However, every action she took was closely watched, which increased the strain and made the dynamics of the family even more complicated. She had to deal with criticism, public opinion, and the unrelenting scrutiny of millions of people in addition to managing the home. Kody, who had previously felt in control, suddenly had to deal with both internal strife and outside criticism. The scrutiny undermined the calm power he had depended on, and each slip-up became conversation starters. There was little space for the image he had meticulously built as arguments that had previously been private were now discussed, analyzed, and publicized. The strain was also felt by the other wives. As everyone handled their individual responses to Mykelti's outing and the public's reaction, allegiances were put to the test. The meticulously preserved balance had been appended, and in its place were doubt, mistrust, and the mounting recognition that nothing in the home could be kept a secret. The public response, in Mykelti's opinion, reaffirmed the importance of her choice to speak up. She observed how her disclosures had an impact outside of the family, making the Browns and the general public face difficult realities. The meticulously constructed narrative of an ideal family had fallen apart, giving way to an unvarnished and unadulterated reality that was hard to deny. Tension increased as a result of the inspection, leading the family to an unavoidable conflict. The cameras and a world ready to see the disintegration of a household that had long seemed untouchable magnified every encounter, every choice, and every emotion. The Brown family had entered a new era, where secrets could no longer be kept hidden, and private conflicts had turned into public drama. The Brown household was at an all-time high in terms of tension. Mykelti's disclosures, months of covert manipulation, and unsaid annoyance had led to a string of confrontations that were now unavoidable. Once bound together by outward appearances, the family was now split apart by the truth, animosity, and the public's unrelenting scrutiny. Encouraged by the encouragement and affirmation she had received, Robyn started to challenge the subliminal forces that had dominated her life for years. She expressed long-suppressed frustrations, questioned long-accepted decisions, and wanted acknowledgement for the sacrifices she had made. Every word she said was heavy, trembling the household's foundations. Kody found it difficult to keep his power when Robyn and Mykelti both exposed the unquestionable truth. Now he faced constant challenges to the quiet authority he had depended on. Disputes that had previously been kept quiet in private turned into public disputes, revealing long-suppressed animosities and unsaid complaints. The other women responded differently to the new circumstances and handled the turmoil with caution. Some silently agreed with Robyn's position and voiced their support for her. Others were unsure of their allegiance and hesitated. There was tension, mistrust, and a pressing desire for resolution in place of the well-maintained equilibrium that had held the family together for years. Mykelti watched as the family she had previously watched in silence now had to deal with the full ramifications of their decisions. Her choice to speak up had sparked an inevitable, ugly, and bitter reckoning. Every member of the household had to face the reality about themselves, one another, and the relationships they had long taken for granted after the illusions of harmony and control were destroyed. The reckoning was public as well as personal. Every action, choice, and altercation was closely examined by both supporters and detractors. The world watched as the Browns struggled with the fallout, having to deal with a world where the public and private spheres had clashed and where it was no longer possible to disregard the effects of concealed realities. One thing was certain: by the end of the day, the Brown home would never be the same. The family would be affected for years to come by the consequences of the reckoning that had already begun. Although the dust had started to settle, things were far from quiet at the Brown home. Relationships and the distribution of power within the family have been profoundly altered by the disclosures, conflicts, and public scrutiny. Caution, introspection, and a cautious attempt to make sense of the new reality had taken the place of silence. Now confident, Robyn started to speak up more frequently. She established long-ignored boundaries and sought recognition for her sacrifices and contributions because she was no longer prepared to accept passive dominance. Every action she performed represented a change in the dynamics of the entire home as well as in her own life. Kody found it difficult to adjust when faced with the indisputable reality and Robyn's increasing aggressiveness. His once subtle and unquestionable authority was now openly contested. He had to deal with the public backlash from Mykelti's disclosures while also preserving family unity. Every choice they made was scrutinized by their family members, as well as the millions of others who had followed their life. The other wives were also walking a tightrope. Quiet tensions persisted, alliances were formed, and loyalties had changed. Some made the decision to publicly support Robyn, while others exercised caution because they were unsure of the long-term effects on the family and their personal connections. Once a meticulously planned organization, the home was now a complicated web of compromise, bargaining, and introspection. The family's surroundings were still shaped by public opinion. Every action became a topic of conversation. Interviews were analyzed, and social media arguments raged. Long used to maintaining control over their image, the Brown family now faced a story they were unable to completely control. Each individual had to face the repercussions after the world was made aware of their personal hardships. In the aftermath, Mykelti felt both relieved and worried. She had revealed the reality, sparked a reckoning, and raised awareness of the silent battles Robyn and the others faced. However, she also understood the long path ahead and the brittleness of the family's ties. The emotional road had only begun, but change was unavoidable. One thing was clear as the family adapted to this new situation: the Browns would never be the same. The long-kept secrets had been exposed, relationships had changed, and the public and private spheres had clashed. The aftermath was a fresh start, full with obstacles, discoveries, and the possibility of change, not a conclusion. The Brown family had to navigate unfamiliar territory in the weeks after Mykelti's discoveries. There was a tense, seething environment in the home after the initial shock and public attention. Every interaction was significant. Every discussion needed careful thought, and every choice had the risk of reliving previous scars. Armed with her newfound voice, Robyn started to demand changes in the way the home operated as well as in her own life. She advocated for greater independence, acknowledgement of her contributions, and equitable participation in family choices. Some of the other women were moved by her aggressiveness and subtly started to doubt the relationships that had long held them back. However, it also caused conflict with Kody, whose efforts to keep things under control suddenly ran against the growing demand for autonomy and justice. Kody found it difficult to adjust to the constraints of both private anxiety and public scrutiny. His attempts to regain control frequently served merely to emphasize the family's divisions. The dynamics he had depended on for years were no longer as predictable or controllable, and arguments that had previously been private now bore the echo of public awareness. Little steps toward reconstruction started to appear among the stress. Family gatherings become more emotional but also more honest. Compromises were gradually negotiated, limits were challenged, and apologies were offered. It was a delicate dance. The family had to deal with the public's lingering gaze while simultaneously attempting to reconcile past actions with the reality of their altered ties. But there were still cracks. Alliances changed, allegiances were called into question, and the unsaid burden of animosity hung in the void between them. As they adapted to a home where power and control were no longer absolute, the kids too had to negotiate this changing environment. Through it all, Mykelti saw how the household she had previously watched in silence changed. Her choice to speak up had put the family on a different path, one that was full of obstacles but also opportunities for development. Rebuilding would be a gradual, imperfect, and emotionally taxing process, but it was a crucial turning point since the Brown family could no longer deny the facts that had been revealed. Despite the stress and uncertainty, one thing was certain: the family had undergone a permanent transformation. Although the household had been shattered by the revelation of hidden facts, it had also created an opportunity for change, honesty, and a new kind of equilibrium, if they could successfully negotiate the challenging path ahead. The Browns were a different family. The family had been permanently altered by months of unseen conflict, media attention, and emotional outbursts. Each member was forced to face long-ignored truths, relationships they had taken for granted, and the true dynamics of power and control inside their household as a result of the exposing Mykelti had started. Previously quiet and reserved, Robyn had discovered her voice. She stopped moving in silence to hide her frustrations or to please Kody. Her aggressiveness sought credit for her sacrifices, questioned established norms, and changed everyday life. Her position was a turning point, even though not all disputes were settled. Robyn had taken back her place in the family, and no one could ignore her agency. Kody had to deal with the fallout from years of subtly controlling others. Both the family and the general public were now closely examining the power he had exercised without criticism for so long. He was forced to face the fact that power based on repression and manipulation was brittle, and may fall apart when challenged as he tried to strike the new equilibrium. Each of the other wives made their own adjustments. Others gravitated toward Robyn, building partnerships based on respect and understanding. Others paused, still figuring out where they fit into a family that had changed under their feet. Once predictable, the household now functioned in a new world where allegiance had to be won and influence was determined by courage and truth in addition to hierarchy. After speaking up, Mykelti observed the fallout with a mixture of relief and reflection. It had been challenging and essential for her to be the driving force behind change. She had dispelled myths, exposed secrets, and made the family face facts they could no longer deny. She was aware of the brittleness of what was left, though, including the bonds, trust, and sense of cohesion that had once characterized the Browns. Every move was still analyzed, discussed, and debated by the people. In the home, however, a more subdued change was occurring. Although the fissures had been exposed, they also presented chances for sincerity, comprehension, and possibly a more real kind of unity. The Browns had the opportunity to remake themselves on their own terms by accepting reality, but they would never be able to regain the reputation that the world had once held in high regard. Mykelti's bravery had sparked the reckoning, which was now complete. The Brown family, eternally changed, now had to face a future molded by truth rather than appearances. What was left was complex, brittle, and unsure, but it was genuine. And that reality was theirs, not what the outside world would have them believe for the first time in years. Let us know in your comments. And stay tuned by subscribing our channel to get more updates like this. Thanks everyone.